Hey everybody, this is LB of the Boombox Guru channel. I'd like to welcome you all to this new video. So as you see by the title, I got a brand new CD update. Got some hard rock, heavy metal CDs that I had bought recently. Most of this I got around the holiday season, mainly around Christmas. I think some of this I purchased maybe like a week before Christmas. Some of it actually showed up like a day or two before Christmas, which was right on time. And then a few of these items showed up a little bit after Christmas, man. But I got some really good albums, well, CDs that I bought, and I couldn't wait to show you guys. So without further ado, let's get into this CD update. So first CD is Widowmaker, Blood and Bullets, released in 1992. So Widowmaker, this was a heavy metal band that Snider formed after the dissolution of his prior bands, Twisted Sister and Desperado. He started this band, and most of the members of this band were like the remnants of Desperado, which also included Clive Burr, who we all know was the original drummer of Iron Maiden. But Blood and Bullets, man, this is some great 90s heavy metal. Quite honestly, I don't understand why this album wasn't more commercially successful. To me, this record should have been a big hit because it's heavy, it's aggressive, but at the same time, Dee Snider is one of the greatest songwriters of all time, in my opinion. He knows how to write some catchy rock anthems, and that's what this album is chock full of. Nothing but catchy rock anthems. And the music is a bit more heavier and aggressive than a lot of the stuff he did with Twisted Sister, but it just had all the makings of what a hit 90s heavy metal record should have been. So I don't know why it wasn't a huge hit. But in any case, this is considered by most fans to be a very underappreciated 90s heavy metal album. I've enjoyed it from start to finish. There's not one weak moment on here. Dee Snider, as always, he comes through with his powerful vocals, lots of heavy riffs, lots of catchy tunes. They even go into a little bit of bluesy territory, which I think might have been something that they carried over from the band Desperado that he started prior to this, man. But just some great music on here. And this album has been out of print for a long time. I remember when I first saw to look for this album, or the CD, better yet, I couldn't really find a copy that was reasonably priced. Most of the stuff I found was like very expensive, but I was fortunate enough to find a CD copy that was in very good condition on Amazon for a very reasonable price. So I'm very excited to have this in my collection, man. But if you've never heard of Widowmaker, definitely go on YouTube and check out the song called The Widowmaker. And I believe they have a few other songs that are uploaded on YouTube. There may be even a whole stream of the album on YouTube. Unfortunately, you can't stream this album on like streaming platforms. Only the second album, which I don't know much about. But definitely wherever you can hear music or find this album, I urge you to pick it up because it's one of the best 90s heavy metal albums I've ever heard. So definitely check out Widowmaker, Blood and Bullets if you've never listened to this record. Alright, so next, and keeping in line with Dee Snider, I have Dee Snider's most recent solo album, which is called Leave a Scar. This came out in 2021 on Napalm Records, which is one of my favorite heavy metal labels right now. Yeah, this came out in 2021. I kind of slept on this record a little bit when it was initially released. I didn't really pay it too much attention because I had heard For the Love of Metal, which I thought was a good record, but for whatever reason, I can't really get into that album as much. But Leave a Scar is actually a different story, man. For some reason, I just resonate with this album so much more, and this is probably the most aggressive heavy metal that I've ever heard Dee Snider do. A lot of this music on here is borderline extreme metal in some cases, but I get a lot of like power metal, like modern power metal influences on a lot of this record, man. And just like his last album, For the Love of Metal, this album was executive produced by Jamie Josta of Hatebreed, but the production on here is great. Most people seem to like For the Love of Metal more, but I think Leave a Scar is actually a better record. I mean, D is doing some really good singing on here. I mean, he has not lost his touch as a vocalist. Even now, he still manages to just kill it on the singing part, man. His vocals are still powerful. He still knows what he's doing. I mean, just a great record. And I think the reason why I like this one more than For the Love of Metal is because I read where Dee Snider, he actually had more involvement in the songwriting on this album that he did on For the Love of Metal. So that may be what it is. I think maybe that's what, for me, For the Love of Metal was missing. It was just missing a little bit of that D Snider touch in the songwriting, but this one makes up for that, man. But I just really like this record. I've listened to it nonstop. I haven't found a weak moment on this album. Everything about this record, I really enjoy. It definitely one of the best heavy metal albums to come out in recent years, and definitely one of the best albums to come from a heavy metal icon like D. Snider himself. But he has not lost his touch, man. Man, I hope to one day maybe see him live performing some of this recent material. I don't know if that'll happen, but I hope so. But lots of great songs on here. So if you haven't heard Leave a Scar, definitely check it out. I'm telling you, just great heavy metal music all around, man. I think any fan of D. Snider, any fan of Twisted Sister would enjoy this music. Just really good. So next CD is W.A.S.P, The Headless Children, originally released in 1989. This is a reissue that was released on a company called Madfish. Comes with some bonus tracks, which includes some live material as well. I think there's a live performance of Love Machine, which appeared on the first W.A.S.P album in Blind in Texas, which I think that was on The Last Command or Into the Electric Circus. I can't remember. It's on one of those two albums. I think it's on The Last Command. But yeah, W.A.S.P, W.A.S.P was one of those bands that came out of the LA metal scene. They kind of got lumped into that whole glam metal thing, but W.A.S.P as a band they really didn't belong in that whole category of glam metal. They took more from like Alice Cooper. They basically took what Alice Cooper did in the 70s and they just turned it up like 20 notches, man. So they was part of that whole shock rock or shock metal type of aesthetic, man. But the Headless Children actually marked a turning point in the band's career because they decided, well, Blackie Lawless, who was the leader of the band and the founder of the band, he decided to veer away from that more sleazy shock rock style of the older records, and he decided to mature as a songwriter and mature with the content. So the Headless Children, this was like the first record that really showed or really laid the template for the rest of W.A.S.P's career, especially going into the 90s, because this record is more ambitious, especially with the musicianship, especially with the concepts, the subject matter. A lot of the subject matter in here mainly talks about political and social issues that are happening and so forth. So this record marked that turning point in the band's career, man. And this is one of W.A.S.P's best albums. I consider it one of my favorite from W.A.S.P, man. I've been trying to get my hands on a copy of this album for a long time, and I mean, original CD copies, remastered copies, they were pretty easy to find. I think I found this on eBay. Yeah, I think it was eBay where I bought this from. It might have been Amazon. Actually, I think it was Amazon where I actually purchased this from. But it comes with I mean, the CD artwork ain't all that great. It has a little picture of the band during this era, and the liner notes also, it gives a brief background story on the making of this album, and I guess the inspiration, what went into the band deciding to go into this different direction. But one of W.A.S.P's best records, in my opinion, man. I don't think you cannot go wrong with this one, and it pretty much set the stage for where Blackie will go with the next album called the Crimson Idol. But yeah, this was where the W.A.S.P they just really made a turn and matured as a band right here. And I think this was the last album with Chris Holmes until like 1997. And I think it was actually technically the last album of W.A.S.P as a band, because I think after this, the other albums that came out, like the Crimson Idol, and then there was another album that came out like in the mid 90s. I can't recall the name, but those were mainly like Blackie Lawless solo albums, but they were just released under the name W.A.S.P. But definitely a classic heavy metal record. Very heavy record, man. Some great riffs. And Blackie Lawless is a vocalist, man. I think he's underrated as a vocalist. People don't really give him a lot of credit, but he's one of the best vocalists out there, man. He's got a lot of powerful vocals on here, man. But I really enjoy this record. One of my favorites from W.A.S.P. If you've never heard it, definitely go stream it or wherever you can listen to it, man. One of their best records. All right, so these next two albums, I'm going to put them together because they're pretty much by the same band. So as you guys know, if you follow me on Instagram, if you watch my channel, you know I recently finished a book called Nothing But a Good Time, the oral history of the 80s hard rock explosion, which my friend Krista let me borrow. Shout out to her. Also, my aunt got me my own copy of it for my birthday, so I got an early birthday present from my aunt when she bought me that. So anyway, one of the bands that I really decided to dig more into was Cinderella. And Cinderella is a band, like I knew the hits. I knew the hits that they had, but I never really had dug into their music. So I just, after reading that book and them covering different periods of Cinderella, discussing certain albums in the band, it really sparked my interest in them. So I decided to check out their music. So two of the albums that I really have enjoyed from them is Long Cold Winter. Let me see that, Long Cold Winter, and Heartbreak Station. So these two albums, these were the main ones that really sparked my interest in Cinderella. And the reason being is because, again, Cinderella is one of those other bands that have been lumped into the glam metal category. And if, on their first album, Night Songs, that cover art, I mean, they clearly look like a glam metal band. But even that record kind of had a different kind of style as opposed to other bands. But I would say that that album in particular is probably the most closest they came to sounding like glam metal. But Long Cold Winter and Heartbreak Station, it doesn't really, to me, you can't really just call it glam metal. They took a more bluesy approach to that style. I mean, this is mainly just bluesy heavy metal and bluesy hard rock. I mean, Long Cold Winter still may have a little bit of that glam metal leanings to it, but it's a lot more bluesy compared to what Night Songs was. And there's this whole kind of Aerosmith kind of influence that's lingering around it. Uh, some people like the track. Some people that are haters kind of call them an Aerosmith ripoff. I don't think that. I mean, hey, everybody's got to be influenced by somebody. I like Aerosmith, and I kind of enjoyed what Cinderella was doing. I mean, you can't help it. That's who you were influenced by. But I think they made some great music. But yeah, Long Cold Winter still has more of that heavy metal aesthetic to it, but it's definitely a lot more bluesy. Now, Heartbreak Station, this album, I can't really call it a metal album. This is more of like a blues rock, hard rock album. So there's really not a lot of metal on here, but it's still got some really good hard rock uh, songs on here. There's even a few times where they go into like country western. There's a song here where they go full on country western. There's even some like kind of gospel and R&B influences sprinkled here and there. But yeah, this is essentially a blues rock album right here. It kind of reminds me of like when the Rolling Stones did the Sticky Fingers album back in what was that, 71. That's kind of what this record reminds me of. But a lot of great music on here, man. I enjoyed both of these records, and it's actually got me digging a lot more into Cinderella's discography, man. I've checked out Night Songs, and I've checked out the other album after these two called Still Climbing. Both of those are great, so I do plan on buying some physical CD copies of those as well. But these two records right here, some great music. So if you're somebody that's never really dug into Cinderella and you kind of just wrote them off as another generic glam metal band, definitely check out these two records because you'll be pleasantly surprised that that's not what they were all about, man. They were essentially a blues rock band. They were essentially one of those bands that helped bring that kind of blues, that 70s blues rock that Aerosmith and Zeppelin and all them were doing in the 70s. They brought that into the 80s when the glam metal movement was really prominent. But some great records right here. I've enjoyed both of them. All right, so the last CD that I'm going to show you guys, and this is one that I technically I already have this, but this is like one of my favorite extreme metal albums of all time. So, being the collector that I am, I just wanted to have like an OG copy, an individual copy of the album, and that is Fear Factory, Soul of a New Machine. And this is kind of weird considering the other albums. It doesn't quite fit in with the other CDs that I just showed, but this was one that I ordered off of eBay around Christmas time. It showed up about a couple of days afterwards. But in any regards, if you follow me on Instagram, you probably all know that this is one of my favorite extreme metal albums. Fear Factory was one of the premier bands that helped bring industrial metal to the forefront in the 90s. Soul of a New Machine was it's definitely a masterpiece of extreme metal, of industrial metal. I know a lot of people tend to consider The Manufacturer is their best record, and The Manufacturer is a great record. Don't get me wrong, but for me, I consider Soul of a New Machine to be their best album because nobody has done what this band has done. They essentially took death metal, brutal death metal. They took elements of grindcore and they fused it with industrial music. And the way that this record sounds, bands still have not came to that. They have not caught up with that even by today's standards. I think that this record could come out now and still be groundbreaking. I think it still will get critical acclaim. That's how timeless that this album is, and it's been over 30 years ago. This year, it'll be 31 years. But no other band, and you have so many different genres like deathcore. You got brutal death metal. You got all these other extreme metal genres that have emerged since this album's release, and nobody has still came close to what this band did on Soul of a New Machine. It still sounds fresh even today. It sounds fresh. Like I don't know. That's what's so amazing about this record is that it's just timeless. It doesn't sound dated at all. Maybe some of the subject matter can come off a little bit dated, but the sound quality, the sound, the musicianship, not nothing. I mean, and you know, this was a groundbreaking record. I mean, I think Burton C. Bell, I think he was the first vocalist in extreme metal who did the whole alternating between clean and guttural vocals, and then Dino Cazares, excuse me, I always butcher his last name. Cazares, he's one of the most influential guitarists of all time. He had a lot to do. His riffs were very influential to a lot of modern guitarists. I don't think Dino really gets enough credit for that, but that machine gun style of riffing that he employed, like that was a huge influence on a lot of your most of your newer bands. Most of them are probably looking back at him and trying to figure out how he did that. I think he was just as influential as you could say in the '90s as you could say a Don Bad Daryl was. But Soul of a New Machine, man, this is a great record. And you know, I just had to get like an individual copy of it. I already own a copy of this. There's a little mini box set that I have where it has all of Fear Factory's albums for Roadrunner Records. But I just have always had the urge to want to have an individual version of this, and I'll probably somewhere down the line get individual copies of the other ones just so I can have like the liner notes and everything and look at the pics and so forth. But really excited to have this in my collection, and this actually wasn't hard to find, especially on eBay. There was like a lot of used copies in very good condition that I found on eBay that they were selling for a reasonable price. So I was really surprised by that. So I went ahead and bought it. I was like, you know what? Let me go ahead and get this right now. But yeah, glad to have an individual copy of this, man. I can just pick up and look at the photos and everything like that. Just really sweet, man. But yeah, Fear Factory, Soul of a New Machine, one of the greatest extreme metal albums of all time. If you've never heard it, what are you doing? You need to go listen to this album now. I'm telling you, it will blow you away. All right, so that's it for today's CD update. You know, I know it's been a long while since I've done one of these CD update videos, but I can tell you, I got enough. I got enough stuff that I've bought in the past probably year where I could do like 10 or 12 of these CD update videos in different genres. But I just wanted to focus on what I had recently just got. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up and give me a like because it does help out the channel. If you can, share the video and other places if you can. I really would appreciate that. Also, be sure to hit the subscribe button and tap that bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop new content. I also want to give a huge thank you to everybody that's been subscribing to the channel, everybody that's been watching the videos and showing their support. I truly appreciate it. And as always, hope everybody has a blessed day, a blessed week. Love, peace, and music. Peace out, y'all.